Good day, and welcome to another episode of Agent X11, Hellywood Dark Journalist. Another light in this darkened world. I am your host, Penny L.A. Shepherd, and I am Agent X11. My co-hosts are David Zublik, Heather Day, Joan Renee, Chris Montgomery, Skip Press, Tom Althouse, Jessica Garza, Edward Medallion, Dr. Keith Abloh, and TJ Ward.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are tonight's entertainment.
Agent X11, Hellywood Dark Journalist, begins now.
And welcome to another episode of Agent X11, Hellywood Dark Journalist. My name is Penny L.A. Shepherd, and I am Agent X11. I am joined today by my co-host, Jen Marie.
That's good.
I'm getting a little bit of a slapback, not sure why. And our guest today is Gary Clemente, Untold Stories from the FBI Hoodlum Squad. I'm getting a lot of feedback. So, Gary, I'm going to let you start, and I'm going to turn my mic.
Well, thank you for having me on again, Peg. I really appreciate the opportunity always to be here. It's a way to really advance my father's legacy and what he's done over the years as a top FBI agent back in the 1950s. A lot of people don't know that in the 1950s, the mafia and the FBI went head to head with each other, and it was a cold war of law enforcement and organized crime that people really aren't aware of, and how historic it was. You had the FBI butting heads with the mafia after the mafia had their big Appalachian conclave in 1957 in November, and that's when my father really started to investigate organized crime, because he was of Sicilian descent to begin with, and he could speak the language, and they knew that he could deal with people like Carlo Gambino, who was the most powerful mobster in the world at that time. So my father's organized crime uh, 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 stretch started at that point. He started in the FBI in 1950, but in 1957, he started truly investigating organized crime and the mafia in particular.
Now, today we're talking a little bit backstage, and you and I talked about Joe Valachi. Is that how you say his name? Valachi Papers? Valachi?
Actually, in Italian, it's pronounced Balacchi.
Ooh,
But
Valaki. Okay.
well,
Um, uh,
we'll excuse you from that. That's
Us
the
gringos say
Americanized
Valachi.
English for
Valachi paper.
Valachi. But in Italian, when you have the CH letters together, it's always pronounced like
Okay.
a K. So, like
Valachi.
Lucchese, it's not Lucchese, it's Lucchese. So,
Okay. Right. Like is it Francesi or Francesi
well, if
or
and
Francese?
actually in Italian, Michael's name would be pronounced Francesi. Francesi. It's like a TZ sound, like pizza.
Right.
Francesi. But he pronounces it. His family, they've always pronounced it as Francis.
Oh,
Francis.
ha.
That's just they Americanized it. That's all they did. That's what his family
Okay.
did.
So we were talking a little bit about Joe, and I'm still getting a lot of feedback. Not sure why. Can you hear that?
I don't hear any feedback. No.
Okay.
I
I do.
don't.
Is it from
I
me?
do.
You're saying?
I don't know where it's coming from because I've done 3 shows and I haven't had any feedback on any of the shows. So I'm gonna mute you for just a second. Okay, yeah, it's coming from you. So that's all right. I'll unmute you in just a second. We'll just have to continually mute ourselves. So we were talking about Joe Valachi and how horrific he really was. I remember when the Valachi papers, sorry, I'm mispronouncing it, came out and the sordid tale that was told. But you said that there's a person even worse than him, which is Nicola Gentili. And I'm going to let you talk about him and I'm going to mute myself.
Well, before there was Giovannacci, there was a man named Nicola Gentili who came to America as a stowaway on a boat illegally in 1900. And Nicola Gentili went on to be a part of the honor. He came here at the age of 19. He was born in 1884 in Siculiana, Sicily. So he came here to the age of 19. And he was a very enterprising young man, and he eventually got involved with what they call the honored society. What Italian criminals had got involved with loosely as an organization called the Honored Society, and also the mafia. And he did a number of things over the years that were quite incredible. He was the mediator many times with different family disputes that people were having. He eventually became the temporary boss of the Pittsburgh, Kansas City, and Cleveland mafia families. He was in this. This was in the 1920s. So he became temporary bosses to them, and he was quite well respected. He was sort of a roving handyman, consigliere. He was an advisor to different families and people, and he had a quite interesting life. And what happened was Nicola decided late in his life, after he left the United States, wanted to move back to Italy when he was older, and he decided to write his memoirs. Well, you're in the FBI. You're not supposed to be writing your memoirs. Nobody does that. You don't do that. That's like lesson number one. Don't write your memoirs. Okay, somebody might come across them, and a lot of people might get arrested. So you don't write your memoirs, right? But he wrote them anyway. And what happened was there were agents. There was an agent or two from the FBI, from my understanding, that were in Italy at that time. And they got a hold of the memoirs, and they sent those papers back to the United States. Be that as it may, the mafia allowed Nicola Gentili to die peacefully. They did not kill this man. For whatever reason, we don't know. But he was allowed to live, even though he had written his memoirs. And he wrote I have them right here. I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you how much he wrote. This is how much he wrote in terms of his memoirs. And we're talking about 185 pages of his life that he wrote about.
That's a lot.
Yes, exactly. This is it. Okay, these are the papers that were given to the FBI, and eventually in the early 1960s. I forgot what year it was. It might have been 1961 or so. It might have been 1960 that my father translated these papers into English. They were written in Sicilian. He translated them into English. And I remember specifically my grandparents, my Sicilian grandparents, coming over and helping my father out to translate the Sicilian into English. And I remember seeing a reel-to-reel tape recorder and papers and notes, and my grandmother and my grandfather telling my father the certain slang or idioms that the Sicilians would use in their language. Now, my father spoke Sicilian, but he did not speak it as deeply and as well as his parents, my grandparents. So these were the papers of this man's life, Nicola Gentile, which could easily make its own movie if you wanted to. I'm sincere about this. I think he makes Joe Valachi look like a piker in terms of the influence and the amount of things that Nicola Gentile did in his life. So it was quite fascinating. I'll give you a little rundown. We'll give you a brief rundown of what he had done. Okay. Nicola Gentile was a Sicilian mafioso who traveled the United States as part sort of an underworld handyman. He was utilized for different things. He was born in the southern Sicilian community of Siculiana in 1884, and he arrived in the U.S. at the age of 19. Much of his time in the U.S. was spent in western Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Missouri. As soon as he came to America, he traveled to New York and immediately got a ticket to see his brother, who resided in Topeka, Kansas, at that time. So he went out from New York to Topeka to meet with his brother. He was a trusted confidant of New York mafiosi from the early 1900s through the Castellamare War. That was a big war that was happening in New York between two different factions, and one of them, Salvatore Maranzano, he eventually became the head of he became the boss of bosses at that time. So he kind of helped to mediate that war. He was called upon to mediate disputes between the Morello Lupo clan and boss of bosses Salvatore D'Aquila in the 1920s. He was also called upon to mediate disputes involving Chicago and Los Angeles crime bosses and underworld rivals in New York City. So he had dealings with Al Capone, as a matter of fact, and we'll get into that. Gentile made a number of trips across the national criminal network and briefly served in leadership roles in Kansas City, Cleveland, and Pittsburgh. He was on intimate terms with Pittsburgh bosses Gregorio Conti and John Bazzano, and Cleveland bosses Joe Leonardo and Frank Ciccio Milano. He served as a capodicina, a capo, a lieutenant, and a counselor in the Pittsburgh Mafia, and as a temporary commander of the Kansas City Mob. So you can see this guy, he got around. He was he traveled a lot in the United States. He wasn't just in one city like most mobsters were. Gentile experienced several close calls. The most dramatic occurred when he was called to the Chicago underworld confrontation of Salvatore Maranzano at the conclusion of the Castellamare War. Then Pittsburgh boss Giuseppe Saragusa had made some secret accusations against Gentile, and Gentile was summoned for a disciplinary hearing that easily could have resulted in his death. In a face-to-face meeting with Al Capone, Gentili denied the charges and threatened to behead any person making those accusations. Capone, who recalled meeting Gentili in the days of mafia boss Mike Merlo, was impressed by Gentili's courage, and Siracusa and Capone, they backed off. In 1937, facing narcotics charges from a federal arrest in New Orleans, he returned to Sicily. After World War II, when Lucky Luciano was deported to Italy, the U.S. narcotics enforcement agents believed the two men teamed up in Sicily to arrange drug smuggling into the U.S. So in 1937, you had people turning to the use of drugs. You heard about that in The Godfather, that Vito didn't want to have anything to do with drugs. And they started pretty early with drugs, so that was beneath them. Although there were many mobsters that did not want to have anything to do with drugs. They felt it was immoral, even though they could steal and kill. They felt that was immoral. Okay. About the time of his escape to Sicily, Gentili decided to write about his mafia experiences. He's going to write about it. A manuscript was shared with American agents in Italy. It was translated to English by my father and later turned over to the FBI. Well, it was translated actually after it was turned over to the FBI, not before. It was translated after. He co-wrote his manuscript with Felice Galante, repeated and expanded upon the material in an earlier manuscript, and series of articles were based on the book, was run in Italian newspapers. Gentili's early manuscript, published book, and articles were used by U.S. law enforcement officials as corroboration, possibly also as foundation for the tales told by mafia informant Joe Valachi. It's likely that bits of Gentili's work were provided to Valachi to fill in the considerable gaps in his personal underworld knowledge. And finally, Gentili received an underworld death sentence for his violation of the mafia's code of silence. He broke that code of omerta by writing this manuscript. However, his assigned killers took no action against him, allowing him to die of old age. Gentili's passing was not noted by the American press at that time. So this individual was quite adept at traveling around the United States at that time and doing his mafiosi activities with different mob families and different people. Quite an interesting individual.
Did your father ever tell you anything about him when he was translating that?
Well, I witnessed it as a boy. I don't remember him telling me, son, I'm translating the manuscript of a mobster. I didn't know what was happening quite at the time. Not that it was secretive or anything, but I remember it wasn't until years later that I realized that my father was translating the Nicola Gentili papers with my grandfather and my grandmother. That's how I learned about it.
When you were growing up and knowing what your father did, I know I've asked you this question before, but did you feel any fear about the mafiosa?
No, not as a boy. My father had a weapon. He had a gun, and he carried it a lot. So I knew he was with the FBI. I understood that the FBI was a vast law enforcement organization. My father wasn't just a police officer. He was part of the creme de la creme of law enforcement at that time. I will tell you that when I was a little boy, I guess maybe I looked up to him even as a little 2-year-old. I was about 2 years old, and somehow, some way, I got into my father's closet. My father always put his weapon It was a snub-nosed revolver, that he always carried in his holster. And every night when he came home, he would put it on the top shelf in his closet into an ammo box, a metal ammo box. But somehow, I knew that I don't remember this, but I knew that he was putting that thing away. And I climbed up the closet, got into the box, opened the box. I took the gun out. It was loaded. It was loaded at the time. And I went out into the front lawn with it. Hey, look what I got. Well, my father, found out that I was on the front lawn with his gun, came out immediately and it absconded, but it took it away from me. I don't remember getting punished or anything, but he was just amazed as, how did you get up there? I don't know how you got up there, that shelf, and got a hold of that gun. But here's another story about feeling fearful. We were fairly well protected, and at one time there was the possibility of a threat against my father. So two agents, not my father, two other agents from the office came to pick up me and my sister and my mother. There were 6 of us later on, but there were just 2 of us at that time. They picked the 2 of us up, put us in a squad car, and drove us around for a while they were picking up, looking into the individual that made the threats against my father. But they were perceived threats. It wasn't an actual threat. What had happened was my father had an informant that was in the Communist Party USA previously, a few months previous to my father going into the top Hoodlum Squad, okay? So this subject that my father developed as a clean informant that he had inserted into the Communist Party USA was disappointed that my father had left him and that he was turned over to another agent. He had really trusted my father. He also had some depression, mental anxiety problems at that time, and he called up the bureau, and they perceived that this individual was saying things that were threatening to my father, but actually they weren't. He was kind of confused, and they found all of this out. So that's why they picked us up. They drove us around. Then they found out that it wasn't really a threat. It wasn't a mobster, that it was the poor guy just wasn't feeling well at the time.
Jen, did you have any questions?
I mean, not that I can name. I have so many questions, but do you have the original papers that he had written also before your dad translated them?
Can you say that again? I'm not getting a good feed on what you're saying.
The original papers. Do you have the original ones
Well,
that
it's
he
written
wrote?
in Sicilian.
Yeah.
The original papers? No, we don't. We don't have the original papers. I don't know. I don't know what happened to them. I don't know if he probably wrote them out in longhand. And I'm trying to remember. I don't believe he might have typed them. But I don't remember whether they were written in longhand or whether he had typed them when he was in Italy. I can read you a couple of paragraphs of what he wrote. Would you like to hear? It's interesting. This
Yes,
is
please.
an individual that was not well schooled. He didn't have much of an education, but this is how he started. This is how he started the Nicola Gentili papers. He says, Siculiana, a small town of Sicily, did not prior to 1900 offer any opportunity for work or secondary school education for the betterment of life of its youth. The greater portion of them, in whom there existed the disposition, encouraged by the family while still young, frequented the shop of an artisan, where they struggled to learn a trade but at the same time often neglecting school so that illiteracy reigns supreme. Supreme. So they would leave school early, before they in high school. He said that they would learn they would learn trades like being a barber, being a plasterer, a welder, things of that nature. So that's he said a trade. He said a trade, therefore, was a privilege enjoyed by few, just as today few have the means to send a child to a university. A trade, therefore, was not learned in a technical school, but was learned in the tradition of the shops, but nonetheless was still a trade. So they learned them firsthand from somebody directly. They didn't go to trade school. So that's sort of the language that he would use. Interesting, sort of formal, but you can see he's very intelligent.
Yes. Well, in those days, people didn't really go to school. I mean, even I had a friend that I was a friend that knew an individual who was a rodeo king. He owned a lot of land in Texas. He never went
Mm,
past the second grade. So in those days, sending a kid to school was actually a hardship because
yeah,
they would help support the family by doing, whatever, even if it was just sweeping out a store shop or whatever.
mm,
They would manage to try to help the family that way. So
yeah,
illiteracy was kind of a big thing. People didn't train their kids to read or whatever. It wasn't a mandatory thing. And even now, there's still, why can't Johnny read? Because the kids are getting out of school without being able to, be truly literate.
yes. Well, you've got the situation now where it's sort of devolving. The universities of today are not providing the education that you would think would be a quote good education. You've got so many kids coming out with degrees that are useless, and you have a public school system today that has really been denigrated to the point where you've got in Harvard they have a remedial reading class in Harvard. So you've got kids coming out of high school that don't know how to read properly, and they have to take remedial reading in Harvard. That's how backwards things have turned up now. I
Yeah,
have
I
a
was
university
I was
education
reading on
myself.
11th
Right?
grade level when I was in third grade.
What was that?
I was reading on 11th grade level when I was in third grade.
Mhm.
I was reading on a
Well, I
collegiate
believe
level.
it. Back then, kids were given the classics to read. They read things. I remember the first book that I read was Alice in Wonderland, and I think I was 7 years old, and I was just fascinated by it, and I just read the classics. I think if the only thing they did in public school was make kids read classic books, and that's all they did all day long, you would be shocked with how much of an education of life in the world that they receive,
How many
far
mobsters,
above geology and math and all of that.
Gary, how many mobsters do you think were really actually well educated? Ones that we wouldn't even think. Like Al Capone seemed like he wasn't all that educated, but were these people actually educated? Were some of the mobsters
Well,
really educated?
I think that I can't speak for other ethnic groups, but in terms of my ethnicity, coming from an Italian and Sicilian heritage, okay, uh, that part of the world in Italy, that was the cradle of Western civilization in Italy, and which was taken from Greece. So we it incorporated within its DNA as a people. Remember, turn my phone off here because it's ringing in my ear.
Is that your ringer?
Yes, that's what you heard that?
Yes,
That is
I
my
did.
ringtone.
I know it only because I played that over and over and over again when I was
I'll call
listening
you later,
to.
Godfather. Call you later. So what happened was, I think within the DNA of Italy, you have an understanding of the world that's it's a little more worldly than everyday things. So the education that individuals might have missed directly from school, they learned from life. And you pick that up when you watch the movie Godfather. You know,
Yes.
the Vito Corleone was not university trained, but he was a man of the world. He had great wisdom. He had great foresight. He had common sense. So I think that's what you see in a lot of these mobsters. My father told me for years. He said, "Son, especially the bosses, many of these mob guys, many of these wise guys, son, especially the bosses, they could have been tycoons of industry. They could have been wizards of finance, corporate tycoons, if they wanted to be, but they didn't choose that. They wanted to get their money a lot easier through ill-gotten gains. So that's the sort of thinking and attitude of the world that these mobsters had.
Well, I lived through the mob era, as you know, and Al Capone resided in. Oh wow, that's weird. She just left, and my autoplay thing on my screen just went off. I lived through my actually Al Capone died before I was born, but I think my grandmother actually knew his wife May. They when he got out of prison, and I think they said that he was going crazy from syphilis.
Mhm.
Um, then they sent him to Florida, and when he died, his wife moved to May moved to Hollywood in Florida.
Hollywood, Florida.
Yes, and so I was born in Hollywood, Florida. My grandmother lived in Hollywood, Florida. My grandma was also a singer. She sang across the United States, and I wasn't sure why they decided to go to Miami, but I think I know why. I think she knew the Capone. She lived in Brooklyn. I think she actually sang at the Green Mill, which is in Chicago. That's been in existence for like 110 years. And I
Mhm.
think she knew May, and I think that's why they moved down to Florida because they didn't know anyone in Florida. And they moved there kind of on a lark. And so that's the only thing that oh, here we go. We're gonna play musical. I'm here, I'm not. And that's the only thing that I can figure why she moved down there. I think she sang in a lot of speakeasies because I remember asking her, what was it like for singing for the mob? And she zipped it. She wouldn't say anything, Gary. She just like was, I don't know what you're talking about. And I
Wow.
said, well, Grandma, I'm making my living as a singer now. I'd like to know. And she wouldn't tell me. And then when Deetra um, did her, you going to stay for a while?
Testing, testing. Sorry.
Ah.
When Deetra did her book, um, she wrote about her uncle and said he was a philanthropist and he only killed people that were mean to the family. I'm like, what family? And what a bunch of hooey. And
Whoa.
so I tried to get an interview with her to write her because I said, I think my grandma knew your grandma. And the lady that was interceding for her said, oh, well, she's not, taking any calls, but seriously, he was a philanthropist. He was a good guy. I don't think so. He was murdering people in the streets of Chicago, and the only way that they could get him was through RICO. I wanted to ask you something pertinent to today regarding the Epstein files because we're finding the same kind of criminals. They're just not in the mob. It's a different kind of mob, right?
Mhm.
and their sex trafficking and drug trafficking. In the early days of the mob, they didn't want the drugs within the mob, but then somehow they overcame it and decided it was a lucrative business. When did that happen? Do you remember?
You said, when did it happen? You mean like what year
Yeah.
or what?
Like when they decided, initially they had a meeting and they said, no, we don't want to be in this drug business. But then at some point that changed. Do you know
Well,
when?
I think I just think over time, they could see the amount of money that could be made, and little by little, they were seduced by it. And I think it started happening in the 30s. You started having stronger drugs. You had opiates that were
Was the
being
mob
offered.
involved in prostitution?
Yeah, prostitution. You mean was the mob involved in prostitution? Well, without a doubt. In The
Okay.
Godfather, you hear about Titalia. Titalia was they called him the pimp. And remember the famous scene when the Godfather was in the car. He figured out who was conspiring against him. He said, that Titalia's just a pimp. It was Bozzini all along. And and when you saw Tatalia get killed, he gets killed in a motel room with a prostitute. So prostitution was very much a part of mafia operations, depending on the family. Not every family had it, but I don't think they really liked it that much. It was just sort of okay. He's going to make money. Let him do it. I don't want to do it. It's disgusting, but he's going to make money. That's his business. Let him do it. That's sort
Right.
of thing. And the same with drugs too. They had a look. These people were human beings. Okay, they weren't just evil to the core. Some of them were, yes. There were many of them that were just evil to the core, whether they were guys on the street or whether they were bosses. But there were many of them that weren't completely evil. They had transgressed. They had crossed the Rubicon into a world of just making money. People like Michael Francis. He's a good example of it. Michael's expertise was making money. He just knew how to make money. He wasn't a gangster. He wasn't a killer gangster. He was a racketeer. Okay, he made money for the mob, but he still had a conscience about him. It's interesting because in that world you've got people that grew up in the Italo world of Italy and Greece, and being the cradle of Western civilization, and understanding that the world is more than just something in front of your nose, that there's a lot more to it, and that there's a moral fiber involved in life that needs to ground you. So that's what made the mafia as powerful as they were, because they had a sense of what works and what doesn't work, what's right, what's wrong. They would call themselves the honored society. Back in Sicily, there was a sort of a faction of it, the honored society. These were men of honor. We don't just kill indiscriminately. We kill our own, and we try to help the people in the neighborhood at the same time. But that there were a lot of black and white and grays to all of that. So to answer your question, when it comes to money, when it comes to drugs, to prostitution, things that they didn't quite like doing, they still did it anyway because it made money, and they would allow other people to do those sorts of things and to blacken their lives. That's why Barzini was more feared and more respected in The Godfather than Tatalia was, because Tatalia was a pimp. Okay, he wasn't a complete man of honor. So
I have a comment and a question. So I was watching. I actually played this on Awake Nation News. Uh, Francis did a show on the mob when Mandami, I call him Man Damned, but it's Mandani, when he became the mayor of New York. But
Hmm.
he told a little story, and he's told this story often about his father saying, you don't want to be a police officer, because if you're a police officer, then you'd have to arrest your family, and you don't want to arrest your family, do you? And he said no. But then when he was coming into the mob,
Hmm.
he says, well, we have an alliance with the mob, in which they say, even if your mother is on her deathbed, and we call you, you have to come. And he said, isn't that kind of the same thing? And he said his father couldn't answer it. But the question that was posed to him was, he said he was getting calls and texts for people telling him that they wanted the mob to return to New York because of the socialist, aka communist, Mamdani, becoming the mayor and having the Muslim faction there that are jihadists. And he said he wrestled with, the question that was presented to him was, what would the mob do? What
Hmm.
do you think the mob would do?
You mean, what would the mob do in terms of what Mom Donnie?
Yes,
You know,
because he's
what would they
now a
do?
communist mayor that's elected in the United States of America, supporting a Muslim jihadist faction
Mhm.
in the city where they had 911. What do you think? What do you think Francis said?
Well, if you're asking about what would happen current day as opposed to the yesteryear, those
Both.
are two different dynamics. Okay, suppose it was the 1950s and somebody like this had been elected mayor. Well, let's envision what that would be like. The wise guys would not like it at all. They would not like it at all. As much as they were into making money and stealing and corrupting judges and mayors and police forces and all of that. They still loved America. You know, they were lazy about it. They were lazy about it. Okay, those the mobsters. Many of the wise guys weren't in World War II. You know, and when the 50s came around, they weren't in World War II. They weren't fighting. In fact, my father told Tommy Greco, who had threatened his life at one point. He says, look, let me tell you something, buddy. While my brothers in arms, my fellow FBI agents, when we were of age, we were in World War II. We were fighting the Nazis, and we were killing them wholesale. You people back home here weren't serving in the war. You were stealing and doing things on the black market, stealing meat and gas rations. Okay, so there's this hypocrisy about but guys in the life, the wise guys, yes, they loved America. They were patriotic about it, but still, did they go the extra mile for it? No, they didn't. And they talk a big game sometimes. Would they have done something in the 1950s if there was a communist mayor? I think they would. What they would have done was they would have made things difficult for him. They would have talked behind his back. If the communist mayor was doing business with them, was doing corrupt things with them and making them money, yeah, they would have taken the money. Would they have shot him? No. If he's making the money, yeah, we love this guy. But if he wasn't making money for them and he was giving them a hard time, and on top of that being a communist, yeah, I think they would have talked about clipping him. For
Right.
sure.
He said that The mob absolutely did not support communism. They came to America. They loved America. They did respect the police and the
Yeah.
FBI, etc. They respected law enforcement, even though they, had to clip a couple of them. But they respected law and order. That's, I think, why the premise of organized crime. So they would organize.
Yes, yeah.
But he said that he believed that. He said we wouldn't necessarily take him out, but they're asking, he's getting requests on his phone and texts, and they're saying, please bring the mob back to New York because we want to see somebody deal with this guy.
Yeah, well, like I said, let's fast forward to today. What would happen today? If you have wise guys and you still have a mafia faction in New York. It's not as powerful as it used to be. It's not as well known and widespread as it used to be. It doesn't have its tentacles everywhere like it used to. But today, if Mamdani makes the money, like I said before, they'll turn away. They'll talk up a blue streak about how they hate the guy, but behind everybody's back, they'll take the money that he allows them to generate. Because these communists and these Marxists are in it for themselves, and they're in it for power, and they're in it for making money for themselves too. They really are corrupt people. Are they more corrupt than a wise guy? I think morally speaking, yes, you can make the case that these people are more corrupt morally. They're morally bankrupt as opposed to a wise guy, the Italian wise guys in New York. So you can make that case. Again, if he generates money for them, they'll kind of turn away. He doesn't. They'll make things difficult for him.
Well, this guy's, his premise is basically taking down the United States. He is a communist, and he's supporting the jihadists who actually tried to take down the United States in 9/11 in the very city that happened. I'd like to take a turn to Epstein now because I actually believe this is a different kind of mob. It's not the Italian mob. It's not the it's not the Irish mob. It's not the triads, the Chinese triads. It is within our own government. And so you could say it's part of a cabal, but these individuals aided and abetted in sex trafficking, children, drug trafficking, and they were involved in collusion, high collusion, payouts, in actual congressional meetings where they were talking with Epstein and getting information from him. But I think Epstein is much higher than sex trafficking women and underage girls. I think he is a Mossad asset. That's a different kind of a mob, if you will. It's an assassination team from Israel that I believe is working in conjunction with our CIA. And I believe that their intentions are not to prop up America, but to work from within the walls of our own governance and propagate their agenda and take us down. And so that to me is concerning. Now, as you know, the Epstein files have just been opened, but it's pointing to a lot of different figures. It's pointing to a lot of Democrats. And there are some Republicans, but primarily a lot of Democrats that got payouts, which is odd because they were the ones that fought in the 4 years that Biden was president for having these files revealed. No one ever made a big fuss until Trump went in office. And then they thought they would be able to point a finger at him and say, hey, you're involved. But unfortunately, there's no involvement there other than the fact that he did know him, that he kicked him out of his place. And, as far as we've come to know, what are your thoughts on Epstein at this juncture? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, let me ask you something first. When they had that vote last week in Congress to release the files, the vote was what? 247. Was it 247? Yes.
To one.
Yes, and just one.
Yeah, it was
that,
Clay.
Did you immediately think that was kind of surprising? Were you surprised by that?
No, I think because it was actually utilized as kind of a psyop. If you're talking about the one person, yeah.
Well, now I'm talking about that there were 247 Democrats and Republicans. Almost
Yes,
unanimously said.
it
I
was
thought maybe
actually it
it
passed
might be
the House.
split.
It was it was 427 to 1, and then
Yeah,
unanimously approved by the Senate. But yes,
you're not surprised.
no, I was not surprised
You were
because
not
the
surprised. I was surprised.
The Dems actually thought that they were going to get some goods on Trump.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I think it backfired dramatically on that.
Here's the deal. It surprised me. I said, what's up with this? Something didn't feel right. But if you've got Democrats, suppose let's just say hypothetically, we know that there's a ton of Democrats, many more Democrats involved with Epstein and Epstein Island, and we know that to be. Why would they be so ingratiating to release these files? Why? Why would they want to do that if they're going to be named? Well, here's the deal. If you hear, I think this is true. We hear a lot of different things. Is it true? Is it not true? But Greg Stinchfield, okay, he's on Newsmax, right? I think Greg Stinchfield is on Newsmax. Greg said the files, the files are in vaults in the State Department and the CIA. That's where the files are. That they're going to release just choice little things, redacted things. They're not going to release the files that are in the vaults in the State Department and the CIA. That's why I say you have a vote of 247 to 1, because we don't have anything to worry about. They're going to keep those things in the vaults, right?
You know why? Because it's national security. Because Epstein was indeed a Mossad and a CIA asset. That guy was all over the place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's what's happening. I don't think anything of consequence is ever going to be released, and if indeed what Greg Stinchfield is saying is true, and then I don't know what his sources are or what, but he's saying that they're in the vaults in the State Department and the CIA. They're going to keep them there unless they take them out of the vaults. But nobody's talking about that. They're talking about releasing the information that the DOJ has or something, but right. That's not what's in the vault.
I grew up, I was born in 1958, so I grew up when the mob and everything about the mob was, you didn't talk about the mob. Did you ever think you'd see a day when a member of the mob, a high-ranking member, had his own podcast?
Mm-hmm. You mean like Michael Francis? Oh gosh, I'm not surprised. Given that America is just turned into a corporate welfare, shuffle thing, and turn one thing into another, make some money. And, look at what's happened at Christmas. We start celebrating Christmas right after Thanksgiving. Now you celebrate Christmas, back in August. You go to the store and you say Christmas trees in August because they want to make a buck. So right. That's what America's turned into, a turnaround system where you make that buck. So Michael Francis, God bless him. I just bought some of his wine, as a matter of fact.
How was it?
I haven't tasted it yet. I just got it delivered. It's sort of a fruit wine. It's a pomegranate wine, and he's got a strawberry wine. And I forgot what and he has a cherry flavored wine as well too. I haven't tried, and the bottles look really beautiful, just beautiful, ornate looking bottles. So
Well,
but
next time you're on,
excuse me.
next time you're on, you can show us some of those bottles. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. Can you
Sure, I
tell
will.
people where they can buy your book? And is your second one? You still working on your second one?
Well, I am talking to the publisher right now about getting it printed out. And what I decided to do, Penny, was I've been talking on the previous broadcast about having book 2 and book 3 as 2 separate books. What I've decided to do is combine book 2 and book 3 into one book and to make it book 2, because it involves my father's backstory of when he first joined the FBI and then got into the FBI Academy, and his first field officers that he was assigned to in Springfield, Illinois, Cleveland, and then eventually going back into New York. So I combined the two of them into one. So that was a decision of mine.
And what's the name of the book, and where can people find it?
Well, it's the overarching title is Untold Mafia Tales from the FBI Top Hoodlum Squad. And book 1 was Carlo Gambino, Boss of Bosses. And book 2 will be The Making of a Hoover Agent, meaning my father's years as an agent, rookie agent, and learning the ropes in the FBI.
And are you on X?
Yes, I'm on X. You can find me on X at GP Clemente 16 on X. And I'm also on Instagram as well, too, at GP Clemente 16.
And they can buy your book on Amazon?
Yes, they can find my book, find our book. I say our book, my father's book, and which I've helped him with on Amazon.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Gary. It's always a pleasure having you. And Marie, where can people find you, and where can they buy your book?
Yes, it is on Amazon also. Just type in Marketing is Mind Control. And I'm on X at The Nerd in Charge. And thanks for bearing with me in my microphone issues today. Apologies there.
That's okay. And you can find me on the Awake Nation Monday through Friday. We do 1 hour of news from 7 to 8 a.m. And then we do 2 hours of commentaries, and we have some wonderful, wonderful guests. We are going to have one show this week on Tuesday, and then Wednesday through Friday, we're actually going to be off for Thanksgiving. And please join us when we return as well. And that's on the David Zubik channel on Rumble. And then you can also please like, share, and subscribe to Agent X11. And David has started a new show. He'll be off this Saturday, but his new show is Damn Straight. And he does some, shot off the hip commentaries. And it's fabulous because it is the fabulous David Zubik. I thank you for joining us. You can find me on X at Shepardout. And you can also find me at shepherd-entertainment.com. I'll be working on that blog. I'll also be uploading some shows like this onto my YouTube this weekend. So you can watch them there. And you just Google Agent X11. I don't know if there's a lot of them, but you'll see my face there. I'm the only Penny LA Shepherd, that's for sure. Thank you for joining us. And unfortunately, we are out of time. So we're out of here. Shepherd out.
Nerd out.
Clemente out.
Goodbye for today from Agent X11, Hellywood Dark Journalist. We post new episodes daily. Check out our true crime episodes Wednesdays and Fridays. Don't forget to watch our main show, David Zubik's Awake Nation, on the David Zubik channel on Rumble, live Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. Eastern.